respective seats in their proper precincts, and the precinct chairman will be sure to take account, including of those persons who may be sitting elsewhere in the room. Precinct 1.
9.
Precinct 1 is 9. Precinct 2. 16. Precinct 2 is 16. Precinct 3. 11. Precinct 3 is 11. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 19. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 12. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 18. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 13. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 11. There are 109 town meeting members present. Will you please rise? Join me in saluting the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Before we get to and rambunctious and things, I'm going to make there will be a short presentation after I get through my updating. Last evening, we convened at 7:52 with 105 present, and when we took various counts, we had up to 113 and as low as 108. So that was the quorum, the counts taken on the standing counts. We still have a few things on the table, which we're gradually working down, which is including Articles 2, Article 11, Article 23, 13, 14, 15, 16, which are the collective bargaining contracts. Articles 37 and 38 were added at the last session. These are to do with the stabilization fund. They were to be tabled until after the financial articles. This evening's schedule is on the front with an updated motions. Some motions were never had, and some supplementary material. As our practice is, we'll follow that sequence. And as a courtesy, if people are planning to have presentations specifically for a session, please let the moderator or somebody else know when these things come up. And that is being planned because we try to space these meetings so that we get the best time out. There are some motion pieces, amendments that are up on this table that are small amendments to some that may be introduced during the meeting. On one other note, I'm not going to summarize last evening's meeting or last session because I haven't finished that. We did receive word from the school department that the auditorium will be available on June 11th. We're not. Good. That's good. That is the one information that I figured would be coming up. A lot of people have already made plans, including some other boards. So in regard to that, we're going to continue. The next session would be on the 16th. So, and actually, we're making quite a bit of progress. Slowly. At this time, I'd like to recognize Mrs. Sharon Fradkin in regard to the kids voting program.
I'd have to go over here, but the kids are coming with me. Yeah, wave some candy, that'll do it. Well, they could walk up on stage, but. So come around, you guys. Thank you. These are future town meeting members. Okay. So everybody, if you don't know me, I am Sharon Fradkin, and I am co-chair of Kids Voting. I'm co-chairing with Lynn Jardin, who is the principal of the Gibbons School. And I want to thank you all and Mr. Hanson for allowing us to take some time at town meeting to introduce Stoughton kids to town meeting. Hopefully you've all heard about Kids Voting and you know what it is. And if you don't, please call me and keep your eyes on things between now and Election Day, because these kids and many others are going to go to the polls and they are going to vote with their parents at the polls on Election Day. And we report the results in the newspapers, and you will get to see how they voted and whether it was like the way you voted. One of the things that we do in Kids Voting is we do a bookmark design contest. And these kids are the winners of that contest. So we've brought them here to get their certificates. We had many entries and there were 10 winners. Unfortunately, 2 of them are not here this evening. And I want to thank my husband who donated his time to prepare the files, and Standard Modern Printing who printed them, so no money was spent in the bookmarks. The bookmarks are available out on the table, so feel free to take some on your way out, and they will be at Stoughton Public Library probably, September, October, November time frame. On the back of the bookmarks, our sponsors to date for Kids Voting Stoughton are listed. Kids Voting is by donation only. No town money is spent on it. No school money is spent on it. It's only for individuals and businesses who give in small amounts for the most part. Just to let you know, this year we have lost a couple of banky type sponsors. So if anybody is willing to give some money or knows somebody that would like to, we would certainly appreciate it. And if anybody wants to be a volunteer on Election Day to help the kids vote, please see Pat Basler at the Stoughton Library. She organizes and has for many years organized the volunteers. So what I'm going to do is have Superintendent Rizzi shake hands with each child and have Lynn Jardin come up to give the certificates that we have prepared, and I will read the winners. And if you want to clap for your school, go ahead. So Dhruvi Patel, grade 1, South School. And unfortunately, Dhruvi is not here today. Dominic Iarardi, grade 1, St. John's School. Who has the certificate? Here's. Thank you, and then you can just walk right up there, honey, and your mom will get you. Okay. Andrea Craig, grade 2, Gibbons School. Ava Rodriguez, grade 2, West School. Leza Pereira, grade 3, West School. Unfortunately, she is not here. Isabella Yacobucci, grade 3, Hanson School. Michael Iarardi, keep walking, keep walking. Somebody will find you at the end. Michael Iarardi, grade 4, St. John's School. Alyssa Cole, grade 4, West School. Trinity Rouse, grade 5, Daw School. And Alex Monk, grade 5, the Gibbons School. Although some years kids from high school and junior high do happen to do bookmarks, this year they were all elementary. But we had a great contest, and you can go to the library and see a display of all of the bookmarks that were entered, and feel free to take some. Thank you for your time.
At this time, does the Finance Committee have any comments that they wish to make at this time?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. No, not at this time.
Okay. Mr. Hartman, you had a flyer out here. Do you wish to make a statement about it? We'll give you this time. Okay. It's just available. Is my deputy present? Mr. Mullen, could you come here 1 second? Oh, great. How great thou art. In reviewing some of the information on Article 35, I do have a situation that this article could affect me, and I'll be very specific. I'm in a butter by 2 pieces of parcels of property that is a subject of this article itself, and that's, so at this time, I'm asking the deputy moderator to preside, and we'll go from there. You'll have, I'm just going to give you the information in the packet with the pink cover. There is the most updated motion that was corrected as far as the proper form. It looks so simple now, but until we understood everything. So at that point, the gavel is handed to our deputy, and it is now 7:59. I'll give you a shot now. Yes, the Finance Committee. Well, they can do it if they got the copy there. Mr. Coleman, do you wish to?
Do we have any status when the June 11th, did we vote? No, we didn't vote.
No, because it was the people, it was announced that the clerk and the staff and several other people all have already scheduled meetings that night that would conflict, so.
One other thing. Just a bylaw.
General bylaw.
Okay.
General bylaw.
Okay.
Mr. Deputy Moderator, I can read this one.
Okay, this will be read by Rick Hill of the Finance Committee. Mr. Hill?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Moderator. Recommendation, Article 35, which is actually on page 97 through 102. That's not, who's this? I'm going to read the main motion. That the town vote to insert regulation of vacant and abandoned properties as Chapter 71 in the general bylaws of the town of Stoughton, Chapter 173, Section 1 through 14, as printed in the warrant.
Okay, motion's made and seconded.
I'm sorry, Mr. Deputy Moderator, apparently
okay.
this article reads differently in the handout that we just passed
Okay,
out.
this would be Article 35, ID 35, regulation of vacant and abandoned properties. Mr.
Correct.
Hill?
Thank you, sir. To add and adopt vacant and abandoned properties as Chapter 173, Sections 1 through 12 in the general bylaws of the town of Stoughton as printed in the warrant, except that the following corrections in the table in Section 173 through 175, Row 2, $300, shall be amended for properties that have become abandoned or vacant for less than 1 year, but more than 90 days.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hill. Does everybody have that handout? The pink handout that was handed out this evening? Yep, I believe everybody has it. Is there a second? Second. Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion?
David Asak, Precinct 1. You know, I have an awful lot of respect for the proponents of this article and for the Board of Selectmen who presented it. My problem with it is that it's overbroad, it's over-inclusive. I mean, it's page after page after page of definition of regulation that defines the factors upon which our town can take our property away from us. When you buy a home, you get a deed in fee simple. Fee simple means you own that property and nobody can take it away from you. The government can't take it away from you. The bank can, but that's a different discussion. The government can't. This is an article that allows the government, our government, and this is not the federal government bossing us around, the state government imposing their will. This is us deciding to let the government take a little bit more freedom. And this freedom is our core American value to own property. I said to my neighbor that there's a warrant article in front of us that allows the town to take the property from us, our property from us, if we don't mow the lawn. He didn't know what was more foolish, this article or the town meeting representative that would vote in favor of it. Now, I acknowledge that I took that out of context, but it's in here. What this does is it says that the town can take abandoned or dilapidated property. Then it defines abandoned or dilapidated property to include not mowing your lawn, not painting your house, decay. Decay, it doesn't say 75% of the structure is decayed, 25% of the structure is decayed. It says decay. How many of us don't have some decay on a freeze board or a fascia board or a trim board? Now, you might say that's ridiculous. The town's not going to take it from us. Then why are we passing a regulation that gives them that authority? And don't say that they're not going to take it away from us. What if a group of neighbors got together and said, Jones won't paint his house, it looks like heck? Somebody who's authorized in this town can knock on the door and say, hey, we can take this property if you don't paint your house. Don't give them that authority. And why would we? Why? Because we've got ours, and I got the money to paint my house, and my neighbor doesn't? Look, we all want the tools. Well, I shouldn't say that. Many of you might want to give the government the tools to do this. I don't want to give the government any more tools, and I don't want to lose any more rights. But to those of you who want to give the government the tools to attack abandoned and dilapidated properties, first of all, let's look at this. It should be both abandoned and dilapidated, not whichever one applies, not within this reach, because I think we can all agree if a piece of property isn't lived in but it's in good shape, the town's got no business taking it. And conversely, if the property is dilapidated but somebody's living in it, who are we to decide that we're going to take that away from them because they can't afford to maintain it? This is not fair. It seems to me that we could structure it properly to say that we're going to take property that's abandoned and dilapidated. I can define that in one paragraph. I don't need page after page after page of Big Brother coming in and saying, here's all of the factors that will allow me to come in and target your property. Lastly, I'm not sure it works that way. What we need to do is take these properties and put them on the market. Well, what developer is going to come to Stoughton and buy a piece of property that the town has the authority to take away? Or fine for the number of days it takes for him to get his permits and for all of those things. And if you say that's not the intent, fine. But that's what this regulation does. Thank you.
Mr. Coleman, you're next. Eric Coleman, who's next on the list.
Thank you, Eric Coleman, Precinct 5. For some reason, I was asked to move this motion, but it's fine that I didn't. I don't care. However, in regards to what the previous speaker said, the title of this article is Regulation of Vacant and Abandoned Properties. So, did you say something? Oh, so if somebody's living there, it's not abandoned, it's not vacant. Okay. All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, no cross debate, please. Go ahead, Mr. Coleman.
All right,
Don't
thank you.
interrupt the speaker.
I was looking at the original article, and I was the one that found the $300 error, but that's small, and I think we're fine with that. Chapter 133, 173 is from what I understand, a place in the bylaws that's empty now. So we're putting this in. So that takes care of the confusion in that, I hope. Although I was very confused. The article seems to be a good idea because we don't want. We want the neighborhoods to look good. I know we don't want to take away people's property, but this isn't what this is about as far as I read it. Just going through some of the details in this. On page 98, there's got to be time for response to the town sending out a notice that the property's in question. And, excuse me, number 6 looks for 30 days notice they think is sufficient. I don't, because somebody could be on an extended vacation, they could be hospitalized. I think we should look for 60 days, and when I'm done with this, if I could, I'd make a motion to raise that up to 60 days. Page 99, I was concerned with, on F, the owner. They talk about a person, but so as an individual would be the owner as I read it. So I asked town council about that, and he said that the state law defines person more broadly as corporations, trusts, and whatever kind of ownership there is, so that didn't seem to be a problem. Let's see what else. Yes, question to our Human Resources Director, please, through you, Mr. Deputy Moderator. On section 17, are you there?
Mr. Kelly, if you could answer this. Go ahead, Mr. Coleman, ask the question.
Thank you. On 173.8, they talk about an appeal. I know this is a lot to read unless you've spent a lot of time doing homework on this thing, but I did. And the appeal is adjudicated by the town clerk. Could you define for me what the duties are for the town clerk? I had asked you to be prepared for that, please. The job description?
Essential functions or duties as listed are intended only as an illustration of the various types of work that may be performed. The omission of specific statements of duties does not exclude them from the position if the work is similar, related, or a logical assignment to the position. Now, would you like me to read the 3 pages of duties?
No, thank you, though.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Well, apparently we'll just have to get our general idea. We have a feeling as to what the town clerk does. And I'm not referring to any present town clerk, but this is a law that's going to go on for the future, so this is for the position. Do we want the town clerk adjudicating in this?
Mr. Moderator, just to clarify, so I don't have to go through the 3 pages, but the town clerk is empowered in various situations to hold hearings and to adjudicate.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't know that. I'm not sure that I like the idea of one department head deciding that what the other department head, that is the building department, wants to happen, should happen. I don't think there's not a legal conflict of interest, as I was told, but it just doesn't feel right. The other alternative would be an adjudicator, outside, somebody from the outside coming into, what's the word I'm looking for? Arbitrator, I'm sorry, an arbitrator to make a decision, but that's very expensive, I'm told, and I just don't know where to go with this. It's a good article, but it looks like it needs some fixing up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dave Laurie?
David Lurie, Precinct 6. I don't think, over the last year since I started with town meeting, have I ever seen an article that there was so much consensus over what the problem is. It's amazing. The blight, the graffiti, the abandoned, the problems with crime. Who wants any of that? It's all very, very negative, and we all want to do something about it. But never have I seen an article at the same time being so diametrically opposed to my viewpoint in terms of how to get that problem resolved. So I did a little homework myself, as my previous colleague had mentioned, and found out some interesting facts as well. I have a couple of questions. I'm not sure who the petitioner is. I know last week we had somebody from our town selectman who was representing the last article that had to do with abandoned housing. I guess I have a question for through
Well,
you,
to the
through
Board
you,
of
Mr.
Selectmen. To the Board of
Board of
Selectmen.
Selectmen. There was one Board of Selectmen member, I believe, who was opposed to this article when it was presented. I believe, through you, Mr. Moderator, that Ms. Walsh had some comments about what why they opposed. Could you help elaborate on why you felt this article should not go forward?
Why don't we address your comment to the chairman of the Board of Selectmen? He can always defer to Ms. Walsh if he prefers.
Yeah, there on page 102, Board of Selectmen support this article 4-1 with Vice Chair Walsh opposed. I'm curious to know as to why. To the Board of Selectmen, through you, Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Moderator, through you to the previous speaker. That's actually a mischaracterization of what the Board of Selectmen did. What we voted to do was insert that article as presented, and Ms. Walsh voted not to insert the article as presented. I don't want to speak for her for sure, but in my mind, I had some similar, the town manager and I were just discussing this, I had some similar reservations about that article. I think one of the colleagues on the board, Mr. O'Regan, if he's here, supported that article, and if he'd like to come, I defer to him.
Mr. O'Regan?
Mr. Moderator, all this deference, I'm not used to it. Through you, Mr. Moderator, to my chairman, the question was why Selectwoman Walsh voted no. I wouldn't presume to speak for her to answer that question. The general tenor of the voting on inserting articles that I recall was that the vote to insert indicated in general support by the selectmen, but I don't want to get hung up on whether that was an endorsement to adopt the article. The question concerns Selectwoman Walsh, and I wouldn't presume to speak for her.
Well, Ms. Walsh, would you like to? Mr. Laurie, are you satisfied with that, or?
I didn't hear a comment as to why, and I guess for whatever reason, we're not going to be able to hear that, but that's, I guess I should attend the meetings in which these comments are made.
Ms.
so-
Walsh, would you like to comment, or just use the microphone if you are?
Cynthia Walsh, Precinct 2. If you've been by Castle Walsh and you go down the list of dilapidated, I think I meet all criteria, except that, I mean, right now Castle Walsh is vacant because I'm here with you guys. So I suppose when I'm out shopping at Stop and Shop, somebody from the building department could come up and go, oh, look at that grass, look at that cracked window. Sorry. My father's parents came to this country because their country was under the heel of a tyrant. They couldn't own property in their own country. The rich folks parceled it out amongst themselves. Owning your own home has been a principle in the Walsh family since those folks arrived on these shores. And it may not look like a palace, but it is to me.
Thank you very, very much. I appreciate that. I also took a couple of surveys beyond the Selectwoman to ask certain businesses what they thought of what we were voting on tonight. And mouths were dropping. They couldn't believe that the town would actually vote to do that kind of harm to the economic promise of what Stoughton could deliver for the future of Stoughton. It was amazing. So I guess one question I have is the Economic Development Coordinator is a position that we created last year about the same time. So a year has gone by. Do we have an Economic Development Coordinator? Through you, Mr. Moderator, to, I don't know, Town Manager? Could you speak to that, please?
I'm sorry, what was your question again?
I wanted to ask somebody, whether the Town Manager or anybody in the Select Committee, on the Economic Development Coordinator position, which was voted and budgeted for last
Mr. Laurie,
year.
let's stay on scope.
It is on scope, I promise
I'm
you.
going to rule that, it's not on scope.
It is directly.
Economic Development Coordinator is a position, a different position. It's not,
It's a position
I don't
that-
see this anywhere on the warrant here in that article.
The position is required in order to drive economic development to Stoughton,
Mr. Laurie.
which is directly involved with the...
Mr. Laurie, I'm going to
Yep.
rule you out of order. Please stay on scope here for this article, Article 35. It's not, I don't, let's not debate this, please.
Businesses are supposed to be approached in order to find out what's the best environment to build this economy up for Stoughton so that we wouldn't have as many vacant and abandoned buildings. But apparently that's out of scope, so I won't elaborate on that. He's got the gavel. I'm going to respect the gavel.
Well, I'm just standing on.
I'll
standing
respect the
here for-
gavel. I
Okay.
respect
You have
that.
A little over 2
Okay.
minutes, Mr. Laurie.
No, I have more to say. I have more to say on this.
You have to get in
Who in
2
Stoughton is
minutes.
responsible for maintaining the database that's elaborated on in the article? Who can speak to who in Stoughton would actually be responsible for maintaining the real estate listing information that's on various listings to decide on who is owning a property at any given time, banking information on foreclosures, utilities to discover whether there's actual water, electric, and gas being delivered to a house? Who's responsible for handling the site assembly, plan review, permitting and inspections and so forth do we have this also in the scope of what our current town employees are
Mr.
are
Laurie, is there
spending
a
on?
question in this?
That's the question.
Okay,
Who is
can-
doing this?
can-
How many hours
All right, let me.
are set aside to
Hang on
handle
a second,
that?
sir. Let's ask the town manager. Can we have an answer to that if you can?
Through you, given the scope of the question, you're talking about several employees. You're talking about the town planner, the town engineer, the town building official, and the town assessor.
Okay, do we know how many properties that they would have to be responsible for at any one given time? Or are they all being handled, or is somebody deciding which properties should be on a list and who should not be on a list? It seems a little bit arbitrary.
I actually left out DPW and the treasurer collector, and since we don't have a bylaw yet, there's not a list. If you're talking about a list of abandoned and vacant properties, we do not have one.
But when this was drafted, did somebody consider how many properties that we needed help with? Did somebody come up with some number like there's at least a dozen properties that needed to be registered? There must have been some scope of problem in Stoughton. Isn't that correct?
The scope of the problem is based upon the number of complaints that have been received about abandoned and vacant buildings, especially from neighbors, and how those abandoned and vacant buildings detract from their property values. And there, you will find them in virtually every neighborhood, but how many there are, frankly, I do not know.
So there's a pile of complaints somewhere in town that
Yes, there are various complaints.
You've looked at and said, hey, here's the scope of our problem, we should have an
Correct.
article for that.
Correct.
But we don't know what that number is. It's more than a dozen?
I would say the number of complaints we have are at least 50.
So there's at least 50?
Yeah.
Okay.
You got about.
No, I'm not done yet, I'm sorry, I'd like to use all of my time. Which party,
Mr. Laurie,
if there's
excuse me, Mr. Laurie.
Yeah,
Time's up.
listen,
By the iPhone. here.
listen,
Time's up.
this town has to decide
Mr. Laurie,
whether on
please
the other
take your
side,
seat.
when on the other side of this action is
Mi-
taken, what kind of an economy are we going to have? One that's controlled by the government,
Mr.
or
Laurie,
one that's
excuse
friendly
me.
to
Come on, let's be
private
fair about
business?
things. Other people want to talk. Thank you for your comments. All right, Mr. DeFelice?
Thank you, Deputy. Like most of the previous speakers, looking through this page after page of this onerous proposal takes some doing. I'm sure you all felt the same as you went through it. But my question is, what causes this condition? Well, I believe that at the bottom of the economic ladder, there are a lot of other people here at that point that can't keep up with the elite of the town.
Mr. DeFelice, on the article, please, not on.
I'm talking about the article.
I think you're starting to talk about
Well,
conditions
why don't you
of
wait till I
people.
say the second sentence? Thank you.
All right, I'm sorry to push you along, but other people want to talk.
Our superintendent of schools had said at, I think, a previous meeting, that we have about a 30% poverty level. We also, in addition to have a high percentage of senior citizens. Some of these seniors live on a meager retirement, Social Security, or have opted to enter into reverse mortgages in order to stay in these homes that are the subject here. And I would ask, do you really think that these people really want to live in a dilapidated house? Of course they don't. But we should respect their dignity and leave them alone. What about fairness? I asked the proponents what they intend for the following. What about the Cape and Reynolds building? Is that going to be a special case? What about the old barn along the driveway as you drive up to Elite Fitness? And have you also noticed the two outbuildings at the YMCA? Okay? If you look closely, the one closest to the street is virtually overgrown with the forest around it almost engulfing the entire building. There's also another building that appears to be an old barn. If you drive by there and look up the roof, that roof looks like it could cave in on it almost any time. So I guess the question is, will these properties become more politically acceptable to the people in Town Hall? But there is a bright light here, because I believe the private sector is already solving the problem that the proponents described to us. Over the last several years, you might say a new cottage industry has arisen. People are buying these old homes and properties, they're rehabbing them, they're tearing them down, not just in Stoughton, but all the surrounding towns. Our company participated in one in Easton this last year. And what's happening, they're rehabbing these into new homes. They're not taking the properties away from people, they're buying them. And guess what? At no cost to the town of Stoughton. So if such a rehab is occurring, it makes one wonder why we need this bylaw. I'll give you an example. There's a property currently being rehabbed as we sit here tonight. And it's at the corner of Kinsley Street and 138. And to kind of focus it in a little bit, it's across from the Corner Cafe. A few months ago, if you looked at that building, you'd probably want to take a torch to it. Excuse me, Chief. But take a look at it today. Take a ride by there. They've been doing some extensive work there. They've been putting siding up for the last week or so. That building, according to this bylaw, would have been one of the first that they would attack. But take a look at it. It's being rehabbed. It almost makes this proposal moot. But as you probably know, I handed out a proposal, a proposed amendment, because I really feel, and however this goes tonight, I would like to try to protect some of those most vulnerable people that we live next to or within our town. So, Mr. Deputy, I'd like to offer the following motion. I've distributed copies to everyone, I believe, that should have them by now. And that motion would be to amend section 173.8 under appeal by adding, after the last sentence of that section, the following. Property owners who are disabled and/or over the age of 65 shall be exempt from the enforcement of this bylaw.
Second? Okay, heard the second. Any discussion on the amendment?
Mr. Moore, if I could just for just a second.
You have 4 minutes, a little over 4 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I won't need that. Thank you. Again, as you know, I've been up here a number of times with a member of Precinct 8 trying to fight for the elderly among us. I know it's hasn't gone too far so at this point, but I really feel that when we have these folks that are just, you know, some of these people are just trying to eke out, you know, they don't have dual incomes anymore. They've contributed to the town. They've built the schools. They've paved the roads. They've done everything that the town would expect of any citizen. And for the life of me, maybe it's the way I was brought up. I'm a lot older than a lot of you folks here. But in the old Italian homes, you were brought up to respect not only your parents, but the elderly. And I know it's an old world thing, I guess, and maybe that's why I have a problem with this, but I would hope that you would at least add this amendment so that if it does pass, we can protect some of these other souls that deserve it. Thank you so much.
Okay, on the amendment, discussion, Mr. Coleman. Do you people, okay, on the amendment?
On the amendment, we're talking about vacant and abandoned properties. We don't think we have any 65-year-old plus or disabled people living there. Could the maker of the motion define disabled for us so that we'll know what we're voting on? What is a disabled person according to this law?
Unable to maintain the property.
To the maker of the motion, please.
Mr. DeFelice?
Thank you to the previous speaker. I think we all know a disabled person when we see one. A disabled person may be somebody that is infirm with age. It could be a veteran that's returned from the many conflicts that we've had over time, whether it be Vietnam or current, that are returning and have certain issues that make them handicapped. Maybe I'm using, again, showing my age, I'm using an old term. I know there's a lot of more politically correct ways of saying this, but I think we all know, no matter what you use for a definition, these are people that can't do a lot of things that we do as a normal course of events. Does that help you?
Yeah, it helped me in a way, because if you can't define something, you can't make a law. You can't say, well, people, we want to let these people be free and not keep up their property. But this isn't a place where they live. These are vacant and abandoned properties. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. DeFelice.
Just a quick response. There are a lot of people living in such properties that we or others would consider. You heard somebody, I think the first speaker went through a whole series of definitions. I know some people whose houses need painting. They live in those houses. We can take care of that.
Okay.
So I think, it's pretty easy to recognize and define. I mean, if you needed to require them to have a doctor's letter, well, I suppose you could do that too.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more discussion on the amendment? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. O'Regan? O'Regan, rather, excuse me. This is on the amendment now.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bob O'Regan, Precinct 1 Board of Selectmen. I come to the podium with a lot of sympathy for Potter Stewart DeFelice. But as he was speaking, I was rereading portions of the bylaw that's proposed. The concern is that we have potentially disabled or elderly people living in properties that this bylaw defines as having a material health and or safety condition that's detrimental to the public and the people in the surrounding neighborhood. The requirement under the bylaw is to encourage the property to be brought back to building code, health, safety, fire, water, and sewer codes. I would think that as a body, we would prefer to have an ability to find and encourage properties that are being occupied by those in distress to be made more safe than less, especially people who may be unable to see the distress themselves and cause it to be fixed, so as to intervene before something worse happens, like a fire. And so, striking the balance on the maker of this motion's position, I come out against the amendment, ask you to do so, in addition for the vagueness of what disability means. I was reminded of the retired fire chief's comment in the committee hearing when this article came up. And I wish he were here today, because not only it's what he said, but how he said it was, I wish we had this. This were his words, when I went into buildings and saw what I saw, in order to protect people from what's in there, we don't have any tools for us to take care of this. And so on the amendment, I ask you to vote no, and I'd invite the maker of the amendment to come back with a more certain clarification to protect the vulnerable that he has in mind. But I think if we're going to look to take care of vulnerable people, having somebody have bad things happen in a building that we could have, as a community, done something about is more of a risk. That's the way I come out. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Murphy, on the amendment?
On the amendment, move the motion.
Move the question? All right. All right, that's the cutoff debate. Is there a second? Okay. On the amendment only, which is to amend section 173-8, appeal, excuse me. I'm sorry, my mistake. I'm just moving the question. Just reminded by the town council. Just on moving the question, cut off debate. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Okay. Obviously, the amendment failed. No. Excuse me. Pardon. All right. Yeah. Oh, cut off debate has passed. Okay, now on the amendment. Okay, this is to vote on just the amendment. Let me just quickly read the amendment to amend section 173-8, appeal by adding after the last sentence, property owners who are disabled in or over the age of 65 shall be exempt from enforcement of this bylaw. Okay, now we're going to vote on just the amendment. This is just a simple majority. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Okay, I rule that the amendment has failed. Okay, back to the main motion. Mr. Mitchell, you are next on the list here.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Stephen Mitchell, Precinct 8. Was on the zoning board for 14 years. There's a property across from the Hanson School. I had talked to the past building inspector about doing something about that because it's been dilapidated for years. Talked to him a couple times, nothing got done. I'm not surprised. A lot of people had trouble with Mr. Tonis. But to go on further, this bylaw should have been not vacant and abandoned. This should have been dilapidated buildings because this is way out of scope of what we really need to do in Stoughton. If you read through it, we had one lawyer that got up and said it was way too involved, and I believe that entirely, that it's way too involved the way it's written. If you read certain sections, page 100, for instance, excuse me, I'm going to take my glasses off so I can see something. Let's see, where are we? Top of page 100, and by the way, it does say that a vacant building can have people in it, and one of the other speakers tried to say it didn't. But the section I'm looking at, it says, any residential building which no person lawfully resides in is part of the building, in any part of the building. So if a building is vacant for whatever reason, in this town it's considered to be a vacant building, and within 90 days you're supposed to go to the building department, which is under section 173.4, and pay them $150, which my mother died 2 months ago, and she'll be dead about 10 more days. She'll be dead for 90 days, but I don't think I can get her to go up and pay $150, but I guess I'd have to pay that. But that's how ridiculous this thing is written. I believe we should have a bylaw, a very simple bylaw involving being dilapidated. But charging somebody $1,500 that's probably not going to pay it anyway because it's been vacant for 3 years is crazy. There's all kinds of crazy sections here. If you're aggrieved by the building inspector's decision on page 101, section 173-8 appeal, you go to the town clerk. The town clerk is the moderator. Does the town clerk know anything about building, abandoned buildings, dilapidated buildings, vacant buildings? I don't think so. It's part of it's crazy. Like I said, dilapidated doesn't even show up until you get into section 173-2, where it mentions abandoned and dilapidated buildings. And that gets very confusing. You get over to section page 93, section C of 173.2, and you talk about dilapidated buildings. But you never really talk about the definition of abandoned buildings. You do about vacant buildings, and it goes on and on. This is, like I say, after 14 years on the zoning board, the zoning bylaw was 40 years old. Some of it was very difficult to understand because it was old. Some of it was written improperly. This one is written improperly. Let's not pass an article that's not written right. Let's go back and start over again. I would be glad to get together with any Board of Selectmen member and try to help. Maybe get together with some other lawyers that are smarter than I about writing stuff and write something simple that involves dilapidated buildings, not what this is. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Peter Ventresco.
Peter Ventresco, Precinct 8. I look at this as a tax on, another tax on the low-income people and the elderly. Reasons they could take your house is the siding needs paint. Well, that's kind of crazy because some people put up cedar shingles, whites, and they don't stain it, they just let it turn the weather and it turns gray. Some people put up red cedar shingles, and over 40 years they turn a dark brown, and some of the mold builds up in black. But that could be offensive to the neighbor next door, but that's the way this person likes his house to look. And some people move into a neighborhood where there's a dilapidated building already there, and then they want to take it down. Well, they shouldn't have moved there in the first place. Now, the other thing is, as the previous speaker mentioned, there's fees here of $150 a day up to $1,500. And the next one is to registration fees. It's anywhere from $300 a day and not to exceed $9,000. That's putting a strain on people that can't afford it, because if they could afford it, the house wouldn't be in disrepair. Today, riding around, I went by a house, small house. It was white originally, but it was more brown because the paint wore off. It's down into the natural shingles. The grass was high, little kids running around the yard. Now, these people, I'm sure, are not happy with the house the way they look at it, but apparently they fell on some financial hard times. So what are we going to do? We're going to take their house, put them out in the street, or I don't know what we're going to do. So now you're taking their home, the one asset they worked all their lives for, and you're going to take it away from them. And getting back to some of the other questions, who decides if somebody's sick? There's no laws in the book. I thought that was part of the Board of Health's job. If somebody there was a sewer problem, unhealthy condition, that the Board of Health would condemn the house that way. So I don't think we need these laws. And if this does pass, it's going to open up the door for more laws and make it harder for people to survive in town. So I'm asking you to vote this down. Thank you.
Mr. Bob O'Regan.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Briefly, I just rise to correct a misstatement by the first speaker. This proposed bylaw does not authorize the taking of property, and if he could speak again, he tells me he would correct it himself, but here I am, and there I go. What this proposed bylaw allows is for registered property to be brought to essentially code to make the properties safe. And I'd urge you to look at some of the properties around town that you drive by every day. I was on the Zoning Board of Appeals and happy to serve with Mr. Mitchell, I think for 7 years on the Zoning Board with Mr. Mitchell. Many of the applications for the Zoning Board of Appeals for zoning relief include why zoning relief should be granted because it's better than what's there now, which is a very low threshold to do anything, but trust me, that's what you hear on the Zoning Board of Appeals. It's better than what's there now. If you look at some of the properties, and in particular, I think the property across from the Hanson School is a perfect example. I believe this bylaw would allow us to address properties like that. I believe that's what this bylaw is intended to address. There is no way it can be made sense that if somebody's house has some flaking paint, that we're going to send the building inspector and have a registration, because the bylaw itself reads that it has to do with safety and code. That's what this is about. On the one hand, we can't be complaining that our community is deteriorating, that our county government isn't doing anything about it. that when are we going to start fixing it so people who come into the town and absentee landlords buy and sit on distressed property and let them rot, and we do nothing about it. We can't say that on the one hand and then say this proposed bylaw is a little too complicated because it defines abandoned, it defines dilapidated, it defines vacant. Well, you have to do that. So is it perfect? No. Is it better than what we have now? Yes, because what we have now doesn't give our public safety people, I think, the protection they need and deserve against going into properties that aren't safe. It doesn't allow the community to to stem the tide on deterioration on some of these properties that aren't being maintained. And just bear in mind, if you read it, you'll see it just means that the property will be secured, that the property will be made safe. Doesn't mean the property will be torn down, but it is one way to stop things and encourage property owners to do the right thing by the entire community rather than letting their properties rot. So it's a simple question. Do we let the town rot, or do we do something simple? Boil it down that way. I hope you come out in favor of the bylaw. Thank you.
Okay, I have next on the list, Mr. Elliot Hansen.
I hope to be brief on this. Right from the beginning, I like section 173-2, abandoned or dilapidated buildings and/or. So just a building that's dilapidated but is still occupied will fall under this bylaw. And it even says where the owner by his or her action or inaction has failed to correct material, health, and safety conditions, etc. Throughout this whole section alone, there's all kinds of, I think, fatal flaws. I can understand why we need to clean up something like the cross from the Hanson School. No relation. And there's plenty of buildings around here, and in fact, I'm right next to one of them, that need to be addressed. But it's frightening to think that this will, if, for instance, an elderly person is ill, goes into the hospital, when does the clock start for abandonment? There is no definition for when the clock starts for abandonment. So an elderly person who goes into the hospital could very easily be in there. In fact, I could think of a neighbor up the street who had Lyme disease. She was in the hospital for 3 weeks, at least. And from there on, she was living with her son because she couldn't live alone because of the Lyme disease. Well, did the clock start when she went in the hospital? Is that when it became abandoned? Now she's back in her home, but supposing she goes off to Florida for a snowbird and goes down there for 3-4 months. Is that abandoned? When did the abandonment start? We can address the dilapidated buildings, but this here covers way too much territory, is too vague. There's so many holes in this thing that could just leave many people up at the proverbial creek that I'm not going to vote for this, and I certainly hope you would not. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Dave Gulia. You want to pass? Okay. Dennis Gator.
Dennis Gator, Precinct 3. Through you, Mr. Assistant, to the Fire Chief. Do you have $1,500 in your budget, Chief, to cover the fee for the dilapidated Station 1? There will be abandoned on the first call that comes. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Gulia, did you want to speak? Dave Gulia.
David Gulia, Precinct 6. Move the question.
Okay, question's been moved. I heard a second. Okay, this is to cut off debate. All those in favor of cutting off debate, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Okay. I declare that a vote. Okay, now this, back on the Article 35, ID 35, let me just read the motion. Now, this is going to be the abbreviated one. Thank you for helping me out tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, to add and adopt vacant and abandoned properties as Chapter 173, Sections 173-1 through 173-12 in the general bylaws of the town of Stoughton, as printed in the warrant, except that the following corrections in the table in Section 173.5, Row 2, $300 shall be made for properties that have become abandoned or vacant for less than 1 year, but not more than 90 days. That's a summary. But more than 90 days. Okay, that's the Article 35, ID 35. Okay, this is a general bylaw, so just a majority vote. Okay, on the article, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. I declare the article is lost. Okay, I'll take a brief recess while the moderator comes back.
On. We're back. Article 40. Who is putting this on? You can either, it has a positive motion from the Finance Committee or the Municipal Operations Committee.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Recupero.
I move to amend Chapter 59, Article 3 to reflect the changes as written in the printed warrant.
Chapter 59.
It's Article 40. It's Chapter 59 of the Town Code.
Mr. Recupero, do you wish to speak on it?
No, Mr. Moderator, if I could defer to Deputy Chief Devine.
Good evening. Mr. Moderator, we look to amend Section 59-7 with one sentence. Whoever's found in violation of the bylaw when requested by an official authorized to enforce this bylaw state his true name and address to said official. It's basically just trying to close a loophole in the law where when we approach someone who's in violation of this town bylaw, there's nothing requiring them to identify themselves at this time.
In all due respects, Mr. Devine, you're not a voting member of town meeting or a non-voting member, so that motion will have to come from the chairman of the Board of Selectmen.
Very good.
You did? Okay.
Yeah, he made it. So.
And can I just get my place on all of this stuff. It is to, could you repeat what is being removed?
Yes, sir. Would you like me to do it or the chairman, sir?
I'll let the chairman do it.
My motion, Mr. Chairman, is to amend Chapter 59, Article 3, to reflect the changes as written in the printed warrant.
Okay, that's the entire, the
These are the
entire
motions,
article.
Mr. Moderator, these are the motions that were printed out, handed to me, and I was under the impression that you approved them. If you want a different motion, I can make a different motion.
No, that's fine. It is fine with me. Now, if there's any explanations of what's, these are, you're welcome to comment on them.
Okay. Again, the only explanation, sir, is that when we adopted the bylaw for public consumption, the assumption was made that the Commonwealth would be closing the loopholes in the current Massachusetts general law. They have not to date done that. We're just trying to make it a requirement that people who are in violation of this bylaw have to identify themselves to the police.
Okay. I have a gentleman, Mr. Blacker. You had requested to speak on this?
Yes, so Jeremy Blacker, Precinct 2. I'm a little confused here. As the motion said, you would like to pass the changes that are in the warrant. And in the warrant, it says, to see if the town will vote to amend Chapter 59, Article 3, to reflect the changes that are underlined below. And further, when you get down to it, there is a sentence that says, whoever is found in violation of this bylaw shall, when requested by an official authorized to enforce this bylaw, state his true name and address to the said official. And that is underlined, and that is what the police chief has asked that we add. However, there is also another line further down that adds, by criminal indictment or complaint pursuant general law, Chapter 40, Section 21D. And this makes it an arrestable offense to be smoking marijuana in public. So right now, the motion on the floor would also add this line as well, even though the police chief is only asking to make it such that the person caught in violation of this law must identify themselves. So I would like to ask to whoever can answer, what is it that we're voting on?
I can answer that, Mr. Moderator, if you permit me.
Well, as it says on the very first sentence, this is what you call a short form type of amendment, where we do require the entire text to be shown, and that which is being changed from the original is identified as that which is underlined. In other words, those are the things that are either being added or corrected or whatever. And so everything else in there is something that already has been voted, other than those things that are underlined.
Okay, so then if we vote on this motion, it will add the line, which is underlined in 59-7, by criminal indictment or complaint pursuant general law, Chapter 40, Section 21D.
That's correct.
Okay.
Sir, I can clarify that.
Oh, yes?
I can clarify it.
Okay.
That sentence is in there mainly for informational purposes only. Any violation of a town bylaw is by Massachusetts general law an arrestable offense. We can't undo Massachusetts general law.
So in that case, through you, Mr. Moderator, to the police chief, if someone is caught in possession of marijuana, even though the state law says it's only a civil offense, are they also subject to arrest for just possession?
it's public use, first of all. Second of all, that's not that bylaw exists already. It's there. All we're asking is that we add to the bylaw that the people be identified.
Okay. In that case, I would like to make a motion to amend the main motion to remove the language which would make smoking marijuana in public an arrestable offense. Quote, by criminal indictment or complaint pursuant general law, chapter 40, section 21D, or, unquote.
Okay. Could I again comment on that?
You certainly may.
Removal of that language won't matter. Any violation of the town bylaw is still arrestable by Massachusetts general law.
In that case, I would still like to remove it from the text of the law if it doesn't matter. I don't think it should be there.
It's there for informational purposes only, sir.
May I speak on?
You may speak on that because there was a second.
Okay. All right. So there's currently a law on the books to levy a $300 fine for smoking marijuana in public. And this main motion will close the loophole and make it so a person must identify themselves to the police officer. I agree with that. However, I don't agree that we add the language that says we can arrest a person for this. If a person is conducting themselves in a disorderly manner, there are laws to deal with this. And I agree that we don't want people smoking marijuana in public. I think it's trashy, it doesn't reflect well on the town, and we don't want children seeing it. But those are not reasons to make it an arrestable offense. I think it's a serious matter to make a law that deprives someone of their freedom, and this shouldn't be taken lightly. By itself, the $300 on top of the $100 fine per possession is a hefty fine, and I think it would be a waste of the police officer's time, a waste of the court's time, and a waste of taxpayer resources to make this arrestable. Thank you.
And again, for point of clarification, it's already arrestable. So.
Mr. Crimmins. We're on the motion that Mr. Blackham made. Anyone to speak on the main the amendment? Any further discussion on the amendment? If not, I'm going to ask for all those in favor of putting the amendment through, which is to remove the text by criminal indictment or complaint pursuant to general laws, chapter 40, section 21D, or. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. I'll declare it a vote. Unless you want to take a standing count. Do I have 7 people want a standing count? Okay. We will take a standing count. And this is only on removing the line. We're taking a vote on the motion to amend the main motion for Article 40 to remove the text by criminal indictment or complaint pursuant to general laws, chapter 40, section 21D, only. All those in favor, please rise, and the chairman take account. Precinct 1.
6.
6. Precinct 2. 8. Precinct 2 is 8. Precinct 3. 9. Precinct 3 is 9. Precinct 4. 4 is 14. Precinct 5. 4. Precinct 5 is 4. Precinct 6. 10. Precinct 6 is 10. Precinct 7. 4. Precinct 7 is 4. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 8. All those opposed, please rise. Please rise. Precinct 1.
5.
Precinct 1 is 5. Precinct 2. 9. Precinct 2 is 9. Precinct 3. 1 and 1 abstention. Okay. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 4. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 6. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 8 and 1 abstention. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 8. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 2. The amendment to the motion is passed, 63 yes, and again, no, to 43 no. On the main, and 2 abstentions. On the main motion, Mr. Crimmins.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Barry Crimmins, Precinct 4. And I certainly appreciate the efforts of the police department in this regard, but I actually have a problem with the first proposed amendment. Being a due process advocate that I am, this sentence that a lot of people may not have noticed says, whoever is found in violation of this bylaw shall, when requested by an official authorized to enforce this bylaw, state his true name and address to said official. So it is already assuming the person to be found in violation before there is such a finding. So I think that, once again, this is an example of a violation of due process. It's stating that simply by being charged with a violation of the bylaw, that the person is found to be in violation of the bylaw, unless what is intended here is after there is a finding, that then the official wants to ask the person their name and address, but I doubt very much that that is the intent here. So I would move, Mr. Moderator, to strike in its entirety that first sentence of section 59-7 as being a due process violation.
Mr. Barry Crimmins. And on Mr. Crimmins', I've heard a second, on Mr. Crimmins' motion to strike out that first sentence in section 59-7.
That's the remainder of the change, sir, but if I could be allowed to address that argument, if possible.
I did hear a second, go ahead.
Okay. This is no different than getting a speeding ticket. It's no different than when we pull you over on the side of the road, we can demand to see your license and your registration. It's the same thing. There is no due process violation. It's a civil incident. It's a civil issue. Right now, and again, we get calls all the time from our residents, from you folks, of people that are smoking in public, smoking around their homes, things like that. And right now, we walk up to them and they tell us, well, no, I'm not giving you my ID. They can turn around and walk away. That would be like if we were sitting on a stop sign on your street and we pull that car over and ask for their license and the person says, no, I'm not giving it to you. That's the only change we're looking for, that person has to submit and that person has to give us identification so we can properly fill out the ticket that the state tells us we can fill out. The state has given us the authority to fill out a ticket for a civil violation. However, we can't identify the people right now.
Any further discussion? Mrs. Clip.
Karen Clip, Precinct 6. I have a question through you, Mr. Moderator, to the fine gentleman at the next podium. Say I have legal marijuana, and you pull me over, I have slurred speech, you don't know if it's my medical condition or if I've been consuming marijuana. How would you make the decision that I'm under the influence illegally or illegally?
Well, that's a great question, especially since fatalities and crashes for drug driving have tripled over the last several years. And the most common drug found in people's systems in those drug driving cases is marijuana.
Is there
But what I will say is, as far as OUI, and that's what you're talking about, OUI, that's a whole different kettle of fish entirely. This bylaw will not affect OUI. We'll arrest for OUI.
There's a lot of people who use that substance at a very minimal. It'll still show up in their bloodstreams, and they can still drive. They're not incapacitated. It's just controlling medical needs. Is there a document that someone can show you? Because I can show you my driver's license, my name and my address. That don't do you shit for shinola.
Ma'am, you're arguing the OUI drug statute, which is Massachusetts general law. We can't decide that here.
How am I going to prove to you that I am legally using this product?
It has nothing to do with this bylaw, ma'am.
But if you're going to stop me and arrest me for something, there's got to be something I can show you. There's nothing to be shown.
No,
You're
ma'am.
going to make this just because my name is Karen Cliff, you're going to say I use marijuana?
Ma'am, we make OUI drug arrests based on the OUI drug statute, not upon this bylaw.
So what?
And you have to give me your license in that case because you're behind the wheel of a car.
Well, I'd give you a license no matter what. I don't care. But how would I going to prove to you that I'm utilizing this substance legally?
It's not part of this bylaw, ma'am.
Well, you're stating here that you're going to identify yourself. Okay, identify myself as Karen Clipp, but how does the marijuana play into it?
Well, again, ma'am, you're talking about OUI drugs, which is Massachusetts general law. It has nothing to do with this bylaw. We make an arrest based upon probable cause, and then it's up to the court to tell us whether or not we were right. That's the whole purpose of our system. We have that check and balance.
Mrs. Clip, we're only talking about that statement at the beginning that of 59-7, that Mr. Crimmins is asked to be removed is whoever is found in violation of this bylaw shall, comma, when requested by an official authorized to enforce this bylaw, comma, state his true name and address to said official, period. That's all that's in that. Mr. Mullen.
Bob Mullen, Precinct 2. Can I ask you, sir, if we strike this, so
Yes, sir.
if you found somebody smoking marijuana, you couldn't ask them for their ID?
That's correct.
Ladies and gentlemen, if someone's smoking marijuana in my neighborhood, 14, 20, 30 kids, I would call the police, I would ask them, hopefully they can identify these people down there. If we're gonna take that, right away from the police officer, I mean, what are we doing here? I mean, it's important, I think, to identify people. It's one thing if it's one person in the backyard, I don't have a problem if that's legal. But if there's a bunch of people in your neighborhood smoking pot, you're not gonna allow the police officers to get their names and addresses? I think we should, let the police officers ask for the ID and get their name and address. I'm sure they probably won't be Stoughton people. At least we'll know where the people are from. I think that's an important part of law enforcement. I think we should, vote this amendment down. Thank you.
Any further discussion on this, Mr. Gito? This is to remove that line.
I agree with the previous speaker, and I'm wondering if there's a way to change the wording of that sentence to say whoever is accused of violating this bylaw?
Well, again, sir, it's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's
I'm just trying to get you to be able
Sure,
to get a name and an address.
No, I understand that.
And some people are concerned with the word violation.
If you look at the town bylaws, this is how they're all written. Whether it be an alcohol violation or whether it be any other violation, it's just being consistent with the way our bylaws are written. There's no due process violation here. If we assess the civil violation in this case and There is a judicial review, there is an appeal process, and if the court feels we're wrong, then they tell us we're wrong. It's no different than with a speeding ticket. You get found responsible or not responsible.
Okay. If this is the way you want it written, and then that's fine. I was just trying to be a little bit helpful here.
I hear you,
But
Mr.
I'm happy to not be helpful here.
No.
And I'm going to vote against the amendment.
Okay.
But I hope that a whole lot of other people do too. Thank you.
Now, Mr. Murphy.
No. Clarification.
Yes, sir.
Going back from through you, Mr. Moderator,
Yes.
to the speaker. Chapter 59, this is where it starts.
Yes, sir.
59-6, restricted use.
Yes.
When you find someone in violation of, in question of that, that's where the violation occurs, correct?
That's correct.
So once they've passed that point, whether they're in a playground, beach, wherever, in public, they have violated that section there.
That's correct.
From there, you now move on to 59.7, which now gives you the authorization to say, who are you? Where do you live? And get that information.
Which is what we're looking for.
Exactly. So with that, I'm going to vote against the motion because it actually goes in front. They have to violate 59.6 first. Then they get asked what they're doing. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Now, I want to, town council has reminded me, now, in this whole big scheme of things, the only request is to amend the existing bylaw with only those 2 lines added, which were underlined. One of those underlined statements you just removed. So, right now, either on the next vote, this now becomes a negative vote, that negative motion. If you remove that, you haven't changed the motion. The rest of the bylaw stays the same. That's the only thing. So, on any further discussion on this, Mrs. Colburn.
I'm sorry, I swear I haven't been smoking, but I am so confused. If we approve this second amendment, we are basically leaving the bylaw as it stands now in the books.
That's correct.
Okay, so we've basically changed nothing.
That's correct.
I just want to make sure everybody understands because I was more than a little confused. Thank you.
Mr. Hanson.
I just have a quick question to town council, or perhaps he would be the one to answer the question. If this is medicinal marijuana, then how can there be a law against taking medicine in public? I mean, when the good people of this state passed this law, this was definitely foreseeable. But, they say what a tangled web we weave when we do things like this. But just as a point of reference, we know when somebody's intoxicated and driving, whether it's under marijuana, alcohol, or any other prescription or non-prescription drug, that you certainly have to address that. But what are we going to say when the doctor prescribed it?
Mr. Fair, do you have any?
Thank you.
I'm not exactly sure what the question is in there, but all that this article is, as I understand it, is seeking to do is leave things as it already exists within your bylaws, but to just add a component that would allow your police officers to request an identification for somebody who's in violation of the bylaw as it exists. So and as I understand the bylaw, and perhaps, you know, the Deputy Chief could speak further on this, but it is, as written, dealing with just the public consumption. So we're not talking about people with medical conditions in the privacy of their own home. And Deputy Chief, if you want to elaborate on that.
No, that's absolutely correct, Counselor, and that the only request is that the town give police officers the ability to identify people who are openly using in public. That's it. That's the only change. That's the only thing we're looking for.
Mr. Paul Smith, do you wish to? Which is Mrs. Crimmins' motion to strike that line out.
Oh, we're speaking on that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll wait until that's done and then I'll speak.
Mr. Guerin.
Good evening, Jim Guerin, Precinct 6. If we pass this amendment, we've really made this whole article a moot point. We're changing nothing. The problem I have with the proposed amendment is not the sentence that has been proposed to be removed, but the word "found" that's in that sentence. The previous speaker mentioned that they're getting calls from neighbors talking about people smoking marijuana, I guess. Does that constitute a finding? Is somebody's report from someplace, is that a finding so that this person is now in violation?
Sir, our findings are based upon probable cause, which is probable that a crime is, has, or is about to occur. That's what we have. If we're wrong, the court tells us we're wrong. And they undo what we did. That's the check and the balance of the legal system.
You've taken a lot of time from whoever it is was supposed to be in violation. If this was, this word "found" was changed to "observed" by some authority, I'd be all set with it. Okay. I don't agree with this proposed amendment, but because I think that the sentence should remain, but I think the sentence should be revised to be observed by an authority. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Smith, if somebody wants to...
I have a concern. I have a concern about this. You compared smoking marijuana to driving a car and, you know, getting a ticket. Well, getting a ticket isn't okay because the doctors say it's okay, right? Smoking marijuana or consuming marijuana. Now, I've done a lot of research on marijuana, a few years of research on it. But nowadays, it comes in lollipop form. It comes in soft drink form. It comes in pill form. All right, so I'm walking down the street, I take a pill. It could be aspirin, it could be something else. How would you react to it?
What you're talking about, sir, outside of having a prescription on your person is possession of a Class E substance. Again, it's a completely different law, and it's a law we enforce all the time.
So if I had the prescription and I was standing in my driveway, would I be subject to this law?
Yes, because it's in public.
In public?
Yeah, it's a public consumption bylaw, which already exists. It's a moot point. That's already on the books, sir.
Right, I understand that. But I'm wondering how the medical marijuana is going to interfere with your enforcement of this.
It's not going to interfere with anything because the state has not allowed for that public consumption incontrovertible of a town bylaw. Okay? The state has said that you can have it. The state has said that you can be in possession, but the state has not come out and said that you can use it in public. It's no different than drinking in public. You can't drink in public. Okay? The state has not come out and said it. As a matter of fact, the FDA does not recognize this as a medicine. Okay?
Well, they have the patent on it.
Oh, yeah, but
You
what
know
I'm-
that.
But what I'm saying is, it's not recognized that way. It's not regulated that way, all right? I
Well,
mean,
that-
I don't want to get into a marijuana discussion, because it's a simple change in the bylaw that all we're looking for is to identify people. That's it. And again, we're looking to serve our constituents and our residents by doing that, because right now, the law basically has no teeth.
I think that's probably true, so, thank you.
Ms. Bronston?
If we change the word found to suspected to be, it would clarify or eliminate the due process problem. Would you accept a motion to change the language to remove the word found and insert suspected to be in violation?
Yeah, through a totality of the circumstances, we would be amenable to that. So.
Right now,
So I'll make that motion, or if
Oh.
somebody's already made the motion, can we agree to change the language to suspected to be?
okay, now, you want to change the wording here. Now, Mr. Crimmins, you understand your motion was to remove this entire... Okay. So you accept the amendment, which is to change the word found to be...
Suspected to be. Whoever is suspected to be in violation of this bylaw shall, when requested by an official authorized to enforce this bylaw, state his true name and address to said official.
Okay. That's an amendment to an amendment. All those in favor, Mrs. Yakabuchi first.
Hi, Christine Yakabuchi, Precinct 6. I'd like to hear the police department's take on that verbiage. I just want to make sure that the verbiage is fine.
The suspected to be, that's fine.
It is, okay, we're good.
Mr. Azak.
On the
Yes.
amendment, David Asak, Precinct 1, you're
Yes.
going in the wrong direction. Don't make that change. Now you're giving them the power to stop you and question you if they suspect it. They don't need enough evidence to find you in violation. Now they only have to suspect it. So when the neighbor calls and says he was smoking, that's suspicion, and they can stop him. Now, I don't think that's what they're looking for, but you're going in the wrong direction with this.
Okay, Mr. Shastany, you want to have a comment on that? Other than, any further on the addition or substituting the word found to be suspected to be, replacing the word found? On just the amendment to Mr. Crimmins' motion only. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? No. Then I would say it is lost. Now, we're on the main subject is whether to remove that sentence. Whoever is found in violation of this bylaw shall, when requested by an official authorized to enforce this bylaw, state his true name and address to said official and his... Yes. Right, that's correct.
So we're voting on it as
Right.
Okay, I don't know if that was clear. So
Oh,
we're voting on the removal of the sentence.
No.
That's the one.
Oh, no, his... Right, and that vote, I just took, and that was okay. So we're just going back to the original statement. With the amendment that passed. The amendment to pass, the only thing that has been okayed so far by this body has been removing the underlined portion that says by criminal indictment or complaint pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 21D. That has been removed so now we're back to the original motion, which is to include only the change that says whoever is found in violation of this bylaw shall, when requested by an official authorized to enforce this bylaw, comma, state his true name and address to said official, period. Now, the original motion on the floor was to include that underlying material. On that, Mr. Murphy.
Move the question.
That's the cutoff debate. We're now back on the original thing. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. I'm going to declare it a vote unless... On to cut off debate. Boy, we haven't even been smoking it yet.
Okay, good. Thanks,
Now, we've cut off debate. Yes. On the motion to cut off debate on this whole thing, I've heard that. I declare that debate has been cut off. Now, on the motion itself, which is to make only that one change in Chapter 59. That's the only thing you're doing. The other part was defeated, or whatever you want to call it. All those in favor of making the change as printed, except that line that was removed. Everybody got that clear? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. I am declaring that this has, by vote, passed as amended. Article 59. Gee. We're battling over just a few words. 9:35. All right, we're going to get one of those atomic clocks. Well, I'll get a sundial. Now it's 9. We're now going to Article 41.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Recupero.
I move that Article 41 be dismissed.
The motion is to dismiss. I don't know how you do that. On the motion to dismiss, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No, the motion is dismissed. Right? Now is it 9:35? 9:34. I'm going to get a sundial. Then we won't have any questions about that. Even the Article 42.
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Recupero.
I move to amend the Town of Stoughton zoning bylaw by replacing Section M with medical marijuana treatment and dispensing facilities and marijuana cultivation overlay district as printed in the warrant.
And could I ask one other thing? Did that include the map that has been provided?
Yes, Your Honor, Mr. Moderator. Jesus, it's a long day.
On the article itself.
Mr. Moderator, I ask that you recognize the town planner.
What's that? I didn't.
I ask that you recognize the town planner.
Yes. Mrs. O'Toole.
Good evening. This article is addressing medical marijuana. In November of 2012, the Massachusetts voters approved a ballot question which allows qualifying patients with certain medical conditions to obtain and use medical marijuana. In 2013, the Department of Public Health was authorized to issue up to 35 registrations for nonprofit medical marijuana treatment centers, with no more than 5 medical marijuana treatment centers in one county. As you may recall, at the last town meeting, the town voted for a moratorium in order to study the issues, and through the planning process, it chose an appropriate site to locate a medical marijuana dispensary. Through various meetings throughout the winter, which consisted of the police department, the fire department, the youth commission, the public health department, and the planning department, and the attendance of many outside workshops and seminars which we all attended, we were able to look at the town's land use and decided that the most suitable area for an overlay district was the Campanelli Industrial District. The proposed overlay consists of approximately 21.1 acres of land. The question frequently asked is, how do I qualify as a patient? The process is as follows. The patient must obtain a written certification from a physician for a debilitating medical condition. The law specifies cancer, glaucoma, AIDS, hepatitis C, ALS, Crohn's disease, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, and other conditions as determined in writing by a qualifying physician. The law allows qualified patients to possess up to a 60-day supply of marijuana for their personal use. The law directs the Department of Public Health to define the 60-day supply through regulation. We are here this evening to vote on an overlay district which would address our medical marijuana dispensary treatment centers. We've looked at a few areas in the town, and through all these departments, we have felt that the Campanelli area was most suitable for us to overlay this industrial district in the event that someone is permitted and does come to the town of Stoughton to initiate a dispensary. At this town, Stoughton is not one of the towns that has been chosen to be licensed. This is just to do some planning to protect and safeguard ourselves.
Before we go too far, it is required that the planning board report be read into the records, and the planning board voted 4-0 to recommend Article 42. The planning board had 4 members present, for the zoning bylaw public hearing held on April 14, 2014. Therefore, the planning board's vote reflects a membership of 4 for this particular meeting. Mr. Parolin.
Richard Parolin, Precinct 1. Through you, Mr. Moderator, I'd like to ask a couple of questions and make a statement. A while back, there was a gentleman that came before a couple of the board looking for a letter of approval to send to the state to help him get his license. He stated he had areas picked out in Campanelli Park. Are these the areas he had on hold for himself? He had a couple of buildings, supposedly, or one building, lined up for him to go in. Are these the buildings that he had lined up for himself already before we passed this bylaw?
Through the moderator?
Yes.
He did not have these particular sites. These sites had already been overlaid before that gentleman came to the town. Obviously, he had done some research and knew that we were doing some research in the Campanelli area as well as in the Tosca Drive area. We had done some research in that area also. He did not know the exact areas that we were overlaying at the time.
He stated he had a building under an agreement in the Campanelli Industrial Park. One other question, I'll make it brief. Through you to town council, I guess, these are 2 exact lots that are being zoned. Is that considered spot zoning, where it's considered an exact lot or lots?
Mr. Fair. It's in the back, the map is in the back of the supplement. Okay. There is a map in the back of your supplement. Anybody has?
I got one more question.
Well, let him get this one first.
Okay.
Through the moderator, if I may,
This is O2. You may do that. Go ahead.
This is what we're trying to create here is not a new zone as far as residential, business, industrial. We're overlaying an existing industrial zone. This overlay district consists of lot 88, map 143. That particular lot consists of 16.3 acres. The other lot is map 88, lot 141, and that consists of 4.86 acres. In this overlay district, it represents about 22 acres. And the reason we decided on this overlay is it's in the back of the industrial park, and it consists of a lot of wetland areas. And it's not near any residential properties. It's within 500 feet.
Mr. Fair?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm sorry for the delay. I was just looking for my notes. In terms of, I wanted to be able to cite you some specific language in terms of what the courts have considered spot zoning. And spot zoning is considered where a zoning change is designed solely for the economic benefit of the owner of the property. Receiving special treatment is not in accordance with a well-considered plan for the public welfare. So in my opinion, this wouldn't fall into the realm of what would be considered spot zoning, as it's not a zoning change that is being designed solely for the benefit or for a individual property owner or without some overall plan of consideration.
Thank you. And one last question, does the state law say we have to just give them space for a retail store, or do we have to allow them to grow and have all this space? Or can we just make one area as a retail store for marijuana, and that be it, rather than a growing section?
Through the moderator?
Go ahead.
This particular medical marijuana is not only, the dispensary allows growing, it's indoor growing in a locked facility. It would be indoor growing at that facility. If your question is, would it allow it in other parts of the town just to grow indoors? No, it would not.
No, excuse me, that's not my question. My question is, do we have to allow them to grow their own, or can we have just a retail area, and they would bring it in from outside, say from Colorado or whatever, and just sell it?
No, they would grow on site.
We have to do, the
Yes.
state says we have to give them that area too.
To grow on site,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. DeFelice? Mr. Murphy came there first.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, to the planning. What makes this the prime spot to go?
Through the
There's no
moderator? We looked at Tosca Drive. We looked at the Campanelli area, and actually, if I may refer to Mr. Parolin, he had mentioned the downtown area, to have a dispensary in that area. So we had looked at 3 areas. We just put the maps out and looked at areas that seemed to make sense for the town. I met with the fire department, the police department, the youth commission, and we all reviewed those 3 specific areas. That area was chosen. We thought that the Tosca Drive area was a little too dense, and it was very close to the residential area. We thought that the downtown at this time didn't make a lot of sense. We were trying to revitalize the downtown, and it would cause a lot of foot traffic. We thought that that would be an unsafe situation for the children. And we ended up discussing the Campanelli area, that it was out of the way in some senses, and it would make more sense.
With that, I beg to differ. Turnpike Street is a residential street, 30 miles an hour.
It is.
When you go from Turnpike Street out onto Park Street, there's no set of lights there. It's a very dangerous intersection. Getting back to Turnpike Street, we have children getting on school buses, getting off school buses with no sidewalks, no crosswalks. You would have cars traveling up Turnpike Street that would put all these kids in danger. This is a residential neighborhood. We have enough problems down Turnpike Street with cars going in excess of 30 miles an hour. You can ask the police chief that. We also have trucks flying down there. That's a very dangerous area. More and more businesses have been dumped down this area. And I know everybody loves IKEA, but as far as sidewalks down the area, they never really came. We have seen an increase in traffic. We've seen industrial come down there more and more, and this is just another business. Last year, there was an article before us. They wanted to dump $5 million into sewage. I guess a marijuana place isn't going to use a lot of sewage. They'll be sucking up a lot of water, but they won't be discharging a lot of water. I don't see how you can come to the conclusion that this is a good area. If anything, why don't you go over to Mount BJ's, that big mountain over by the BJ's store. Put it on top of the mountain. You build the mountain, they will come. That area is going to become wasteland within 10 years. That's the perfect spot for it. It's isolated. It's not in a residential neighborhood. It's on the edge of Stoughton. It actually gives easy access to Avon and Brockton. I don't understand why you don't move it from here over to there. I've received many calls about this location. People are not happy about this. I'm voting this down. Thank you.
Mr. Parolin, on a point of personal privilege.
Yes, Richard Powell, Precinct 1. I'd like to explain the thing about putting it downtown. A lot of people here remember the adult bookstore okay? And that was my idea of a retail store being put in that district, which would put it right next door to the police station, so it would be watched. That's why I don't like it out of town. I want someplace where the police department can keep an eye on it and watch it. And I was figuring just a retail store in that area. I had no idea we had to let them build a farm out there. Thank you.
Mr. DeFelice.
Mr. Moderator, through to the town planner, is this going to be a allowed use, or is it going to be by special permit down there, or how does that, do those?
Through the moderator, this would be by special permit.
It would be by special permit?
Yes.
Okay. Once you allow that, does that also become designated as an agricultural use?
No, it does not.
It does not. Also, I was wondering, for people that want to conduct, medical evaluations, like walk-in evaluations to bring people, to get people to be able to use the marijuana, would that have to be conducted in that zone too?
It could possibly, but usually the dispensaries, some of them do have physicians on staff. Right now, how it's working in Massachusetts, there are physicians in other areas that the patients will bring their written certifications to the dispensary.
I guess my question was, what if somebody wanted to locate a business there and they would have people come in and they would certify them? Would they be in that zone?
Not the way it's written.
Okay. I don't know, are you aware that at 966 Park Street, that there is a doctor that has an ad to bring people in for $200? You can walk in and they will, I guess, condone your condition. And if you're a veteran, you get 10% off. So how does this relate? Someone that's doing that up on Park Street, should they be included in that zone? I'll give you a copy.
No, they
of
should
this.
not. That is a regular physician's office, which would have nothing to do with this overlay district.
Okay, so these guys are okay with what they're doing?
That I can't even answer, if they're certified to be a physician.
What it says here, medical marijuana walk-in evaluations for Mass and Rhode Island patients. So I'm not sure but it does say walk-ins are welcome, 100% safe, confidential, $200 includes the doctor's time and a certification. Veterans get 10% off. So I was just wondering if something like this should be keep all this related work in one area. Do you think that matters?
I do not. I think that if that's the physician's office, the physician is probably doing other services also. Okay. And that doesn't make it an allowed use in our overlay district.
Okay. My last comment would be similar to what someone said. We talked last year about possibly running Park Street sewer and connecting to the park. Doesn't it make sense that if we have, although the park is abandoned now, one time that was flourishing some years ago, doesn't it make sense that as a town we would want to plan to have that area for some industrial work to come back into the town as opposed to setting this up? I mean, it seems that could be a valuable locale in the future. If the town's going to revitalize, and if you're going to bring jobs into the town, it seems that a lot of those buildings could be turned back into very productive operations and employing a lot of people. And we're sort of giving that up to satisfy this marijuana law. One of the previous speakers said perhaps a downtown area would be good. And we are trying to get traffic into the downtown. If you had one of these downtown, I'm sure you'd have all sorts of people down there. And when they get hungry, they could go to a restaurant and whatever like that.
You're coming very short
Thank you.
on time, Mr. DeFoe. Mr. Malley. Or Mrs. Frankel.
We have town elected officials in this, that we all and many other people have elected. We have people who volunteer their time. They're called the planning board, the zoning board, the finance committee, the school committee, every other committee in town. We have these appointed and elected officials for a reason. It's to come up with their best ideas for the town. If we spend an hour on every single zoning article that is to come, you realize we will never finish this town meeting. I understand that people have a right to speak and whatever, but there are public hearings and public hearings and public hearings, and those are the times to vent your questions on the articles and whatever. We need to be succinct. We need to put trust where it belongs, and that's in our department heads, in our elected and appointed officials in this town. We have 30 more articles to go, not including the budget.
Before you go
we
too
need
far,
to.
Mrs. Frankel.
No, you know what?
Yes, I'm going to say.
Now I'm going to
you're-
say what I want to say on the article. Okay?
Say what you want on the article.
Last year, you put a moratorium on the building places that these could happen. If you do not pass this article, you realize that they can put a medical marijuana facility wherever they want in town. So here's your choice to either have it in a secured location where they know it's going to be, where it's out of the way, where it's as far as it can be from where it needs to be. Otherwise, they can put it next door to your house.
Mr. Malley.
Move the question.
That's to cut off debate. On the motion to cut off debate, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? It has been moved. On this article, it will require a 2/3 vote. All those in favor, please rise, and the chairman take account. Precinct 1. Precinct 1 is 9. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 8. Precinct 3. Mr. Gator. Precinct 3 is 10. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 17. Please keep it down. I cannot hear. Those are things that make us take longer. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 13. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 14. Precinct 7. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 11. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 12. Oh. Which is now what, 9? Yes, sir. All those opposed, please rise, and the chairman take account. Precinct 1.
3.
Precinct 1 is 3. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 7. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 1. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 0. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 0. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 2. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 0. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 0. No. The motion passes. 95 yes, 13 no.
Thank you for your consideration.
$95 yes, 13 no. We move on to Article 40. What's that? Yes. I recognize Mr. Scardino for Article 43.
Mr. Moderator, before I read the motion for 43, I'd like a motion to suspend the rules to discuss only Articles 43 and 44 together because of the related material and the related arguments and discussion related thereto.
On the motion to suspend the rules, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. We will now individually make the motion, and that has been correct.
These motions are in the handouts from this evening, and since I'm going to refer to, I'd keep that in your hands, please. Article 43, ID 43, Schmood Mixed Use, to amend the Town of Stoughton bylaw, Article 16, Stoughton Center Mixed Use Overlay District, Section 200-95, to eliminate the affordable housing requirement as printed in the warrant.
Okay. We'll discuss that. Or do you want to put the other one on?
I'm going to put the other one on the floor, Mr. Moderator.
Okay.
Article 44, ID 44, amend the Schmood parking requirement. To amend the Town of Stoughton zoning bylaw, Article 16, Stoughton Mixed Overlay District, Section 200-97, to reduce the parking requirements as printed in the warrant.
All right, now to clear up some housekeeping. On both of these, I'm going to read the Planning Board's report as required. The Planning Board voted 4-0 to recommend Article 43. The Planning Board had 4 members present for the zoning bylaw public hearing held on April 14, 2014. Therefore, the Planning Board's vote reflects a membership of 4 for this particular meeting. I will also read the statement for the next Article 44, which is essentially the same. The Planning Board voted 4-0 to recommend Article 44. The Planning Board had 4 members present for the zoning bylaw public hearing held on April 14, 2014. Therefore, the Planning Board's vote reflects a membership of 4 for this particular meeting. Also heard was required to have a public hearing was the Municipal Regulations Committee, and that report has been included in your Finance Committee report. Mr. Scardino.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. First of all, just so that we can start off on the same starting point, in your packet you'll see a multicolor map. This is so that you understand the area that we're talking about. It's also represented in front of me. Again, it's basically the blue line. You'll see a number of keys on this map, but we're really talking about the area outlined in blue, just so that we start off right. You've heard us use this term if you've been to master plan meetings, if you've been to planning board hearings. You've heard us use the acronym SHMOOD. It stands for the Stoughton Mixed Overlay District. I know we're all guilty of using acronyms, but I wanted to make sure that everybody understood what it stood for. What is the SHMOOD? The SHMOOD was passed in order to incentivize economic development in a portion of the town. And as you know from driving through the square, the bylaw wasn't effective as it stands, because obviously other speakers and other articles, my esteemed colleague from Precinct 3 talked about the need for the priming the pump in his discussion about the theater project. And what we have here is an incentive program, 2 bylaws that were developed by the town planner and the planning board in order to incentivize economic development, because the existing bylaw hasn't provided enough impetus for businesses to come in. Why hasn't it been effective? I'm going to take these requirements separately. The first one has to do with the affordability component. 20% of the existing bylaw requires 20% of the units to be dedicated for the affordable component. I represent clients in front of financial institutions, and the way they're appraising properties for purposes of giving loans is the banks look at the flow of cash from the property. When you're doing an analysis and several of the units are affordable, it reduces the amount of cash flow that the project will generate. And why do I know that this is holding back some projects? Because the planning board 4 years ago approved a project on the corner of Morton and Wyman Street, approximately 25 or 26 units. And that project got extended in December of last year because it still wasn't built. It still wasn't built because the banks aren't loaning money. The banks aren't loaning money because the cash flow from the properties doesn't support the loans that the developers need. So what this requirement does, the first bylaw change, is to drop the requirement to 0 so that only in the area we're talking about, that would not require the developers to set aside units as affordable housing. Now, during the hearing process, we did hear from some individuals who indicated that we need to be concerned about the affordable component in our housing program. Now, in your packet, there's the yellow piece of paper, and I'd like you to turn to that, because I'm going to address this concern raised by this speaker. If you look down the list, I'm going to draw your attention to the column that says affordability expires. And the only projects that you see with a time period is the Presidential Courts project, which next year at this town meeting, you'll see the CPC already has given its support, but it was too late to get it on this year's warrant in order to keep that affordable. So right now, DHCD, which is the state agency that approves the housing count so that the 10% requirement is met, has indicated to us, to our consultant who's doing the housing plan, that the Presidential Courts remains in the count because those people are moving towards taking over the properties and keeping the affordable component. The next project in there is the Stoughton HOR program, and there's 15 units. And I'll concede the 15 units, and what that means is essentially that our housing count still stays over 10%, which is the concern that this town had about keeping out 40B projects. So my point is that removing the affordability requirement from the Stoughton Mixed Overlay District is really not an issue at all in terms of the housing count. So there's no reason for us to stifle development by worrying about the affordability component in the square. You heard the other evening on the theater project talking about priming the pump. That speaker was talking about using taxpayer dollars to prime the pump. What the planning board and the town planner are asking you to do by this bylaw is to prime the pump of economic development in the square by using non-taxpayer dollars to result in an increase in the tax base and therefore an increase in tax dollars. On another more immediate concern, we haven't had people beating down our doors to develop in the square. We need this bylaw because Tom Flatley isn't coming through that door to develop in the square, ladies and gentlemen. Frank Messina is not coming through that door to develop the center. We need to prime the pump, as my esteemed colleague said, in order to spur the economic development. The other project that was passed by the planning board on the corner of Monk and Washington, a very similar project with retail on the bottom and apartments on top. That project was passed a couple of years ago, and no ground has been broken for that project. We need to get the square going. Similarly, the Article 44 that deals with the parking requirement would enhance the economic viability of projects for developers by reducing the parking component to one unit, one parking space for units 2 or more bedrooms. Now, other speakers during the hearing talked about the so-called parking issue in the square. Now, I don't know about you, but I've been to some Red Sox games, and I hope the police aren't listening to me, but I've parked my car on Porter Street, gone to the Red Sox game and come back. And other than certain town meeting nights at Town Hall where I've had to circle for parking spaces, I haven't found that particular problem. And for those of you that are concerned, the planning board, when we approve projects, we look at the parking requirement on a project-by-project basis. So give us the tools in order to make those decisions on a project basis and not necessarily cause economic development to grind to a halt. We need this project. Just go out to the square. Please vote these 2 amendments.
Mr. Stagnoni.
I'm not talking about the CBD. There's a variety of zoning districts that are shown in this map. It is the large blue line, the larger space out here that's bordered. Yes. And my point is that people have talked about spot zoning. I just also want to say that there's 210 parcels. Town council has enlightened us as to what the definition of spot zoning is. So these bylaw changes are not spot zoning. The area I'm talking about is the blue line up here on School Street, Sumner Street, coming down this way, hitting Brock Street, coming down and hitting Walnut Street on this side, around the Capon and up towards Monk. That's this outline right here. That's the area. Does that help you, sir? Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Stagnoni.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As a former planning board member for 9 years and somebody who sat through this and presented this to town meeting for passage, I definitely have a lot of issues with this, these amendments, particularly at this time. This town meeting has approved over $100 and something thousand to do a master plan. We are almost done with this master plan, and this is not a good time to be making these changes. We are also in the process of hiring an engineering firm probably for $75,000 to look at traffic patterns in the town and make suggestions of how to make different roadway patterns maybe in our downtown. We have a downtown development RFP out through the SRA for our downtown to help us with revitalizing and coming up with a plan for the downtown. We have a housing plan, which this is in total contradiction of, which we are spending $30,000 and having a consultant right now. So to be presenting changes before we finish the master plan, the housing plan, which now like I said, this is in contradiction, a downtown redevelopment plan, and we have engineers in the process of trying to redo our roads. So we make things simpler for a developer now to come in and present a project, potentially plant it where we may want to put a road, or where we may want to put a park, or wherever we want to do something else. Makes no sense to me at all. And I'm just beside myself that this has gone this far. And just to try to address a couple other things about ways to get around this affordable housing section of the downtown. We have options to keep affordable housing within the downtown, as our housing plan says we should do, and the CPC's community development plan is suggesting, is use CPC funds to offset some of these costs to help the developer. That's always a tool that can be used and is not being considered through this process. You can create a housing fund where the developer can pay into and build this housing somewhere else, not in the downtown, if we don't really want them in the downtown. So there are other ways to deal with this, and I just have a problem, like I said, with doing all this planning, spending several $100,000 in planning to allow us to make it easier for somebody to come in and mess up before we even finish what our plan is going to be. We talk about the South Coast Rail. This is, we're just going to shoot ourselves in the foot. As far as the parking goes, the planning board currently has, the requirement is 1.5 parking spots for a 2-bedroom apartment. They want to reduce it to 1. The planning board has tools in the shed, as the previous speaker had talked to, which allows the developers to take parking and have it off-site within 500 feet of the development. It just means they have to enter into an agreement with somebody else, whether it's the town or a private person, a private entity. That agreement can be as simple as saying that if we need the parking, then we will pay you for this, for this use of the spaces. If we don't need the parking, then we won't pay you anything. It can be just that simple. If you go to 1 parking space for this, now you're going to create a situation where a developer is going to have a hard time renting something, because now you're restricting the tenants to 1 car. So you just took the pool of most houses that have 2 automobiles. By the survey done during the theater, the average household within 20-minute drive of here has at least 1 3/4 cars. So the 1.5 is in line with the statistics of what people have for automobiles. Again, now you talk about the projects that that aren't moving forward. This bylaw, I think, was done in 2008. Everybody knows the economy went downhill. That's why there is no development. I was the chair on the master plan for the downtown forum. We had people suggesting that we put a moratorium on building housing downtown. The reason there's no housing being built downtown is because our downtown has nothing for people that would live in our downtown to go to. It's kind of the chicken or the egg thing. So, there's a lot of other variables that go on here. And then, so if you do restrict the parking to 1 per 2-bedroom, now does that put it on the tenant who has 2 automobiles that may want to rent to go find a parking spot, or to keep keep moving the car, and so the police department don't ticket them? I just don't think this was totally thought out. The planning board has tools. Let's finish our master plan. Let's finish our housing plan. Let's finish the redevelopment of our downtown plan, and let the engineer that's doing the downtown road design finish their jobs before we go and make any changes that could jeopardize our future.
Mr. Scardino on personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just some response to some of those points. The last speaker was also a member of our master plan committee, and he may have, but he wasn't on phase 2. Our economic development consultant has discussed these issues. These points are clearly consistent with the master plan of which I'm the chair of. The speakers, your neighbors and friends that have been to our committee meetings, that have responded to our surveys, have all indicated that the #1 concern of theirs is the center. That's been mentioned by previous speakers, including the one before me tonight, that the center is the focus. This is not inconsistent with the master plan, and there is nothing that's coming to you. And I would also, while I'm up here, mention that we are going to have our last forum on June 9th at the Senior Center at 6 o'clock to review implementation. Invite all of you to come. You'll be getting a mailing on this. But nothing from that project is inconsistent with these two bylaws. And we have a problem, we have a solution. That's what this is for. Those people have said to us, enough meetings, let's get some action. That's what these bylaws are all about.
Mr. Anzavino.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Anzavino, Precinct 4. I tend to disagree with the previous speaker. Anybody that's been around for a while knows that we actually were up to 15% approved for our 40B developments. And it has to do with how the law is structured and how it can be manipulated. Now, when town meeting passed this schmood bylaw, they came back the very next year. People came back and tried to get rid of this, and I think the body made the right decision in turning that down and keeping the affordability component. It doesn't take much. You only have to be under your count by one house, and you're wide open again. We did a lot of work to get to the point where the town had some control over these developments and where they could go and what they could do. We did have one project approved under the schmood, and it sits there and it's not done. And the original owner said he had trouble with it based on what was right across the street from him. And that made it very difficult to go ahead and build. But I had been told in my prior position, when I checked with town council, that even though that was approved at the time, if we do change this bylaw, then that approval and that permit would be able to remove the affordable housing that was given as part of that permit under the bylaw at the time. There is another one before the planning board now, and they're asking for a waiver from that. Now, I don't know if they could actually be given that waiver. I know they were supposed to be checking on it, but that's what they were looking at. The reason I voted against inserting this article as it stood when I was on the Board of Selectmen was because there was no provisions, which could be done easily, as a previous speaker said. If someone wants to come in, and other towns have done it, you want to do developments, that's fine. But there will be an affordability component in any development you do. Doesn't have to necessarily be where you're building, but it has to be in the town so the town stays current and ahead of the game. Yes, right now, I believe the sheet you have says we are at 11.24%. And there are things that have fallen off this list already. And not too long ago, within the past month, we were actually within one unit of having 10% as a permanent count for the housing stock we have today. And that will change in 2020. 2020 is going to come pretty quick. Trust me, that 6 years will go by fairly quick. And every unit of housing you build requires 10% of your stock to be affordable. So any building going on over the next 6 years, yes, it's going to add to it. Not only does it add to it, the affordable units that are built count as housing units, which causes you to it just self-propels into additional units being required. So let's keep in mind that there is a concern with this. Some people may not be concerned about it, but I would be, because it doesn't take much. We have 17 units we still can't get the state to give us credit for in this town that was built under 40B, because the subsidizing agency hasn't signed off on a piece of paper yet. And guess who the subsidizing agency is? The state. So we have 17 units we can't even get on our count that would at least put us in a safe place for another 6 years. So I think they're putting the horse before the cart. You want to get rid of an affordability component with some development you do, you should have had a component that would have put it somewhere else. And to be clear, the town planner brought this before the Board of Selectmen, and it would have been a much more, much easier thing to support She actually came in and asked that we reduce it from 20 to 10. Would have been much easier to stand here and say, why don't we do that? At least it keeps us on top of things, all right? But it was changed by the Board of Selectmen, and that's why the vote was 3-2. So I urge you to be careful with this, because the way the game is set, it's not set for the towns, it's set for the developers. And I think we've all seen that in what we've gone through in this town with the developments that have come in. We've finally got to the point where we have some control over it. Let's not give it up. As far as the parking, that's already been done in this town. When the 2 units were built on the corner of Porter and Rose and the other one on Rose, there were some grand schemes going on. So they were allowed to put together and give the people that moved into those units two parking spots for every unit. But don't worry, we got grand schemes for a development around here. You're going to have some off-site parking. Now, that development went under. Those developers are gone. And when they ended up buying the property behind Town Hall to develop that piece, that took quite a bit of doing from the town council, just going through all the agreements that were done with all these other developments, just so that the new buyer knew what they had to provide for parking. Ask the residents over at Porter and Rose where they're parking their cars and what they have to do for something that was promised to them that never came about. Parking off-site. If you can't do the parking, the schmood was done to be able to buy undersized properties, put them together and develop it, not to get all the small pieces and overdevelop it and just slam everything in there. Just be careful what they're looking for here. I don't believe it's been thought out. I don't believe it's a good thing to do, and we really need to watch out what's happening. They've approved it before. And by the way, the one project that was approved under the schmood, all right, went outside of the development area of the schmood. And it took a little bit of doing from council to get that decision written so it could be allowed, because they went into a residential area. It was outside the area. So yeah, you got to trust them somewhat, but they got to be more diligent in looking at what they're doing and what they're proposing and what they're accepting. So just be careful. That's all I ask. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Anzavino.
Hi, Barbara Anzavino, Precinct 4. Many of you don't know me, but the reason that I got involved in town politics was because of a 40B, and I like to think that I'm somewhat of an expert. I've even testified before the Department of Housing and Community Development, so I kind of feel like I do know what I'm talking about. This list right here is very good, and you can see that if you look at our bottom number, this is the number that changes, this 10,742, and it is going to change in the year 2020. And the reason that the schmood is there is because it's part of our housing plan. And if you read our housing plan, it's on page 31 and page 33. And the reason that it's there is because when you do a housing plan for the Department of Housing and Community Development, you have to fulfill certain things. And one of the things that you have to do is this is number 1, identification of zoning district or geological areas in which the municipality proposes to modify current regulations for the purposes of creating affordable housing developments to meet its housing production. Right now, the schmood is our development. This is what needs to go into our housing plan. Our housing plan expires in December. If you don't have, in order to protect yourselves from 40Bs, there's 2 things you do. You either get above 10 and stay there, or you have a housing plan that is approved by the state. The town of Milton let their housing plan fail. They forgot about it, it lapsed. Right now, they're facing 600 units of 40Bs. One of them is in Senator Joyce's neighborhood. 300 units coming onto Bush Hill Road. He can't stop it because Milton's housing plan lapsed. Norwood, on the other hand, had a housing plan. They wanted to put in, I think it was 400 units on the old Polaroid. Because their housing plan did not call for their affordable stuff to go there, they were able to turn it down. So do you want to be like Milton and have a lapsed housing plan, or do you want to be like Norwood and have one? And if you don't have this component in your housing plan, just because you write it doesn't mean the state is going to accept it. The state has to accept your housing plan. You have to have this in here. If we had done what the town planner wanted and gone from 20 and gone down to 10, we would have been able to get away with that, because we could have argued that at 20, we couldn't get people to come into town. But at 10, we would still be providing units, we would still be being safe, and the state would say, yeah, look at them, they're trying hard. But if you take this out and you don't have something to put in there, they are not going to accept that plan. And we are going to be sitting here without one. And we are not going to have another town meeting before that housing plan is due, because it's due at the end of December. So I'm asking you to please vote this down now, have them come back with the right component, and there are many, many options that they can choose. We'll vote for that and say, yes, this can go into our housing plan, and then we can get rid of this. I'm fine with getting rid of this later, but not before that housing plan is due. I really do not, and I also wanted to tell you that under the new 40B regulations, if you are down by one house, you don't get a 40B with one house. You get a developer who comes in, say Woodbridge, for example. They can come back and say, we need 300 units. And then throughout the process, until that 40B is approved, you are not protected. You are not protected because you can only turn them down if you are at 10% or in the safe harbor on the day that they apply. I do not want to wake up 6 years from now and have 40Bs sitting here waiting to be approved. I know of one that is just waiting for us to drop down below that 10. And we were going to drop down as recently as last December, because the state changes the rules all the time. Right now, one of the things they're thinking of doing is not counting elderly housing. That's the newest proposal going into the state. So let's protect ourselves. Let's keep our plan active. Thank you.
Mr. Gito.
I'll be brief. Other people here have said all of the things that I agree with. I also have been on the Master Planning Committee for the past 2 years. One of the things that I think we prided ourselves in was listening to what people had to say, telling him they were going to take their ideas into consideration and make changes for the whole town based on those ideas. What this plan is doing is precisely what other people have said. It's putting the cart before the horse. We've had hundreds of people come to those master planning meetings and express their ideas. There really isn't any sense of what the implications of these changes are on the rest of the town. People have talked about the housing plan, and people have talked about parking. One of the things that the change in the parking for the downtown would do would be to change the parking for all the places, not from what it is right now, which is sort of a wasteland. I think we would all agree on that. But when we finish, people have talked about the need for parking when the town is built out. So why would we all of a sudden say, you know, when a lot of people come to these meetings and say, you know, there really is a problem with parking in the downtown area. And we could have different opinions on that. But when the project is built out, then we're going to have a different set of circumstances. I think that, as other people have said, we should turn both of these articles down now and come back after we finish the master plan, and after we think about really what we need to do for the town, and put something together that makes sense for the whole town. I'm going to vote against this, and I hope you do too. Thank you very much.
Mr. Crimmins.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you for recognizing another point of view that could be heard on this issue. I first want to applaud the town planner for her efforts. I recall a couple of years ago when we were voting on hiring a town planner, and the folks, some of whom got up in the last few minutes and talked about the need for a town planner and why we needed a town planner. And we better get a town planner because we have all these developers running roughshod on this town. So let's get a town planner in here. So we voted a town planner, and we hired a very good town planner. And she's gone ahead and done her work and identified a couple of issues that she has identified as impediments to development. And she's proposed, in my opinion, a couple of reasonable amendments to the bylaw. Oh, and lest I forget, and I'm so happy my good friend from Precinct 4 reminded me that I have a disclaimer to make. The representation that was made earlier about a development in Stoughton Center that was before the planning board last week happens to be a client of mine, and I'm pleased to announce to all of you, both for the free advertising, as well as to announce that finally we have somebody looking to do a development in Stoughton Center. Imagine, not only a development in Stoughton Center, but a development of the very parcel that folks, including my good friends who got up before me, have complained about for the last 2 years, and namely, and I'll give them a plug, the Malcolm and Parsons Insurance Agency, sorry Fitz, that folks have said, when is something going to happen with that property? And I was before the planning board last week, and the reason, before you rule me out of order, Mr. Moderator, these two very articles came up during this discussion. And guess what? Some of those same folks that were just up here got up and said, we can't do that. We can't have that development. We can't reduce the affordability requirement. We can't reduce the parking requirement. I find it rather interesting and a bit amusing that the folks who have complained the loudest about 40B developments over the last couple of years are the ones who are now saying we need these affordable units. Let me remind folks what we're talking about, and if I may, we're not talking about 40B developments throughout the town, folks. We are talking about the Stoughton Center Mixed-Use Overlay District, an area, as was pointed out by the chairman of the planning board, that covers basically the downtown area, down Washington Street, up to Monk, out to Canton and Pearl Street. That's the area that we're talking about. Not the entire town, basically Stoughton Center. The Stoughton Center Mixed-Use Overlay District bylaw. A bylaw that was adopted 8 years ago, May of 2006. How many developments have been done pursuant to the Stoughton Center Mixed-Use Overlay District bylaw since 2006? Not too many. What has happened in Stoughton Center since 2006? Not too much, other than a fire at the Shangdu restaurant, the former Shangdu restaurant, which is the site of the proposed development. But I'm not here to talk about a particular project of mine. If this article passes, so be it, these two. If they don't, so be it. But I applaud Ms. O'Toole, and I applaud the chairman of the planning board, who, as he indicated, is also chairman of the master plan committee. And I find it more than rather curious that the suggestion is made that somehow these articles are contrary to the master plan, that these two good people have been spending a considerable amount of their free personal time to work on over the last 2 years. But let's wait till we have adopted this master plan before we do anything. Let's allow Stoughton Center to stay the way it is until we adopt the master plan. These same folks who talk about this plan and that plan and the other plan. And I've heard person after person get up here in the past and say, how many plans do we need in this town? We have a lot of plans. You know what we don't have? We don't have redevelopment in Stoughton Center. We don't have revitalization of Stoughton Center. Previous speaker, who was involved in a project on the other side of Stoughton Center that you good folks were good enough to agree with the Community Preservation Committee a week ago, whenever we were last here, to fund $500,000 for the revitalization of the State Theater, says there's nothing to do in Stoughton Center. Maybe that's right. Maybe if that theater project gets off the ground, there will be something to do. The developments that were done at the corner of Porter and Rose Street were done under a program that was referred to as transit-oriented development. If you don't know what the core principle of transit-oriented development is, as the name would suggest, it's for folks to live in areas near transit so that they can take the train to work, so that they do not have to rely on their cars to go into Boston. Transit-oriented development in Stoughton Center, in the Stoughton Center Mixed-Use Overlay District. Now, let me turn your attention to the issue of our affordable housing count, which I find very interesting. I did some quick math today, and I hope my Bentley College accounting background stands me in good stead. And I'm sure perhaps the chairman of the Finance Committee can correct me if I make any mathematical errors here. Our current affordable housing inventory is 1,207 units. That amounts to a percentage of 11.24%. For us to get back to 10%, here's what would have to happen. We would have to increase, we would have to go up, okay, the total number of units would have to, the affordable units, we would have to add 1,328 more units to the denominator to get that to 10%. Excuse me, I didn't interrupt you. Please do not interrupt me. I brought with me the town report that I looked at today. And I looked at the section of the building department. And in the third paragraph, it says, residential new, remember, we're talking about the town report of 2013. And it says, residential new construction, largely due to the Goddard Highlands and Forest Green projects, included 70 new single-family homes with construction value of $11.8 million. These figures are nearly double the values of last year. So in other words, the 70 new units were double the previous year. To get to the 1,328 at the rate of 70 per year, even if we take that higher amount of 70 per year, it would take 9 years to get to that point. And that would assume none of those new units were affordable. That would be all 1,328 additional units being all market rate units before our denominator was such that we would fall back to the 10% figure.
Mr. Crimmins?
Yes.
You are really coming very, very, very close to 10
Well, I'm
minutes.
hoping to get to, oh, we're past 10:30, so I don't have to worry about that. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
I want before 10:30 a.m.
Thank you, I almost forgot.
I'll give you, can you wind up in 1 minute?
I will wrap up in 30 seconds, Mr. Moderator. The affordability argument is a red herring. It's a non-issue, and I trust you folks all recognize it. The parking requirement. Drive through Stoughton Center on your way home tonight and look around Stoughton Center and tell me where this parking problem is that we have. What we have is a development problem. Nobody wants to come into this town to develop. Why? Because we have restrictive bylaws. And every time folks get up and say, we need to revitalize Stoughton Center, ask them what they'll do about it. Ask them what the public-private partnership is that they're willing to strike. They don't do it. You want to see development happen in Stoughton Center, you have to give an incentive to a developer to do so. They don't have to come to this town, folks. They can go to Avon, they can go to Canton, they can go to any other of the surrounding communities, okay? If you want them to do it, you gotta give them the incentives. If you don't, if you want to see Stoughton Center continue the way it is, vote these articles down. Thank you. Thank you for your indulgence.
Mrs. Ayers.
Hi, Donna Ayers, Precinct 3. Actually, I was going to go back and sit down because I thought some previous speakers really hit on what really touches me. I'm a resident, I have 4 generations in Stoughton, and I live in an area that has been seriously affected by the 40B and the housing count. So I'll be brief. I just wanted you to know that there are a couple of things that you really should be concerned about the housing count. And my question is, what happened to Manor Drive and all those units? Even though we may have only added 70 houses to our denominator this past year, some have been diminishing that you may not have realized are not in the housing count anymore. Previous speaker told you that. As I'm looking over the housing count, I was part of the first group of people who got together to create the document in the first place because Stoughton didn't have one. When 40B rolled into our neighborhood, it had been a number of years. It took us 2 years to put together the first one. And as I look over this, I noticed that a lot of the projects that used to count aren't on this paper anymore. And we're potentially could lose presidential courts, which are 105 units in one fell swoop. So it's over the last 10 years, not just what happened last year. And we're losing housing that is already on this list and may drop off at any time. Many of these are not guaranteed to stay there either. As they change privately owned hands, it could just disappear instantly, the numbers that you're looking at. I also want you to know that the bar changes. As a previous speaker said, it moves. Every time we build a new house in Stoughton, you need another affordable housing onto the inventory in order to compensate for the new ones that are being built. I also want to say that the residents who really do live here and always have also deserve to be considered, not just the new developers. The people who are coming in have already exploited and abused the people who live here, and we live with the fallout that happens when they're gone. Thank you for your time. I do want you to consider that the housing count is something you need to be aware of. Thank you.
Mr. Ventresco.
Peter Ventresco, Precinct 1.
I don't think affordable housing should go downtown, and I'm going to give you some of my reasons, because all these 40Bs throughout the town, there's lots of police calls every night. Is the police department still here? Yeah. On average, like in a week, how many calls you think you get to these, like Quail Run across from Fire Station 2 or the other? Pardon? What's wrong with that? Because if we put, the police are busy with these 40Bs. If we put affordable housing downtown, and supposedly this theater 10 years off the road when it's down the road when it's built, and all these restaurants downtown, who's going to want to come downtown with their family to go to a movie and to go out to eat in a fine restaurant when you get police cruisers going all over the place? Troubles with these affordable housing units. Nobody's want to come downtown. So I think it's a good idea to keep the 40Bs away from downtown. And one of the speakers up back mentioned they could have a traffic study, which we've had a dozen already. And they put up a new building, and it might be in a way for the new roads they're going to go through. No new buildings being done, but there's a new building on the corner of Park and Seaver Street. So builders are coming in. And there's a builder coming in downtown that wants to put up a building where the Chengdu burnt down. That new building, if it's allowed to go up, will be the hinge pin for downtown because it's here today, not a pie in the sky at the theater 10 years down the road or the railroad station. Thank you.
Mr. DeFelice.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Business friendly. Hear that all the time, right? When you think business friendly, what do you think of? I think of Canton. I think of Easton. Take a ride, even tonight probably, it is a little bit late, go down, take a ride through Canton Center and see how vibrant that center is with the activity. You'll see cars parked up and down Washington Street because they've done something. You know, the same people that were here a couple weeks ago for a little bit of our money came to this meeting of the planning board last week when we had a person come up, as was referred to put up a 4-story building on the former Malcolm and Parsons site. These same people came to that meeting and they said, geez, 4 stories, why isn't it brick? Well, perhaps that wasn't in their budget. Why isn't there a window up on the 4th floor on the side of the building that no one sees? Answer was, that's a firewall. We can't do that. So the same people that are going to bring you to the theater are trying to knock down another person that's coming, wants to come to the town, wants to build 21 units of housing, wants to relocate Malcolm and Parsons back to the 1st floor and add some parking on the rear. These people even wanted the developer to go in 25 feet into his building to provide space in front of the building for people to congregate and sit at. And there's not even a restaurant proposed for this building. So we have somebody that wants to do something. For crying out loud, as was mentioned, 8 years, nada. It's about time that perhaps we do, as the planning board has recommended, let's get something going. You know, it's going to be years before things happen at the other end. We know that. That's fine. But when you've got someone that's ready to go, why are we trying to stop him? And if we're going to have 21 units, I would like to see those luxury units. You want a vibrant downtown? You've got to have some people that are going to spend some money in your downtown when it's developed, hopefully with restaurants, as people are telling us are going to happen. And as far as these studies, you know, On Beacon Hill, when they try to kill something, they put it to committee. When we try to kill something in the town of Stoughton, we put it to a consultant. And enough of that already. I would like to ask a question to the town planner, if she's still here. These proposals that we're discussing, if they go down, what would be the effect on this new proposal for this building that is before the planning board right now to develop that burnt-out hole? Is it going to have a negative effect on that building? In other words, what I'm worried about is the fact that we might be scaring someone away. We have to start somewhere.
I'm not sure
So
which,
too.
through the moderator, I'm not sure that would steer the project away. I think that when I put these bylaws together in the wintertime, the idea was to attract people to the downtown.
Thank you. It's getting late, but I just want to make one last statement. It would seem that we have to get this stuff going. We have this potential person that's going to build this, put this building up, provide some parking, provide housing, and guess what? He's not asking for $1 of our taxes to do that. And that project, if he gets to do it, will probably be done within a couple of years, not 8, 10 years hence. Thank you.
Mr. Coleman.
Eric Coleman, Precinct 5. I move the question.
Has to cut off debate. All those in favor of cutting off debate, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The debate is cut off. We're going to take a separate vote on each one of these articles or motions. And they have to be a standing count. On Article 43, is to amend Town of Stoughton zoning bylaw, Article 16, Roman numeral 16, Stoughton Center Mixed-Use Overlay District under Chapter 200-95, entitled Standards and Criteria, to affordable housing, and delete all subsections in its entirety which are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and re-letter the following sections: I, accessory buildings and structures, to the letter H, to read H, accessory buildings and structures. Well, whatever that is. Okay. All those in favor, please rise, and Chairman take account. Precinct 1.
3.
Precinct 1 is 3. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 1. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 7. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 4. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 7. Precinct 6. Precinct 6. 6 is 11. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 2. Precinct 8. 8 is 7. All those opposed, please rise. Precinct 1.
6.
Precinct 1 is 6. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 14. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 5. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 14. Precinct 5. 5 is 3 plus 1. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 1. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 3. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 1. motion is lost. It's not a two-thirds vote. 42 yes, 47 no, 1 abstention. 42 yes, 47 no, and 1 abstention. That's 89, 90 people present. We still have a quorum. On, 11, I'm just putting the time down, 11 o'clock. On Article 44, it is to amend the town of, please, sooner we, to amend the Town of Stoughton zoning bylaws, Article 16, Roman numeral 16, Stoughton Center Mixed-Use Overlay District under Section 200-97 entitled Vehicular Access Parking and Loading Requirements, Section B, Vehicle Parking, in the SMOOD Table of Parking Space Requirements, by deleting the provision which presently reads dwelling units with 2 or more bedrooms, comma, 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit, plus 1 space per 10 units or part thereof for guest parking, and replacing it with the following: dwelling units with 2 or more bedrooms, 1.0 space per dwelling unit plan, 1 space per 10 units or part thereof for guest parking, including other details as printed in the warrant and the Finance Committee report. Please keep it down. All those in favor, please rise and the chairman take account. Precinct 1.
1.
Precinct 1 is 1. Precinct 2. 2 is 0. Precinct 3. Precinct 3. 7. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is, wait a minute. All right, precinct 3 again. I'm having trouble with stand and then. Precinct 3 is 9. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 1. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 4. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 8. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 0. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 3. All those opposed, please rise. Precinct 1.
7, I believe, here.
Precinct 1 is 7. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 14. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 3. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 13. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 6. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 4. Whoops, I just. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 3. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 5. Again, on the results, 26 yes, 53 no, 55. Can't read my writing anymore. 55 no, that is certainly more than lost. The motion is lost. It's not even a 2/3 or 1.
Mr. Moderator,
Yes.
in view of the late hour, I suggest we adjourn and meet next time at the scheduled time.
Well, there were no 26 to 55. Oh, all right. I'll repeat it. And it is 10:04. We adjourn to the 16th. Is that correct? We adjourn to the 16th. No, and the time is, all the attendance sheets should be turned in. David?